Hey folks, I'm excited about this week. I have my marketing guru, Meredith Banka from Banka Consulting or True Story Marketing, that is coming on today to talk about storytelling, the importance of it, and how that fits into our business and our life. So stay tuned, and I can't wait for you to hear this episode. Welcome to Lead Your Life, the podcast for people who are seeking harmony in business and in life. My name is Debbie Heiser, and I'm an inner mastery and business mindset coach and the chief igniter here at The Lit Up Life. I feel an urgency to help people let go of past messaging so that they can make a lot of money doing what they love without sacrificing what they value most. Welcome, we're glad you're here. Straight from the corners of my mind. Hello, and welcome back to the podcast, Lead Your Life with Debbie Heiser. I know I say I'm excited every time I have a guest, but this guest and I go way back. And as a matter of fact, if you go back in some of the sessions, Meredith was my co-host when I very first started to do this. And I think it was called like Faith Infused Leadership or something like that was the name of the
It
podcast.
was.
Yeah. And so part of why I'm so stoked to have Meredith on this week is Meredith has gone through her own journey of transformation, and I've gotten to luckily have a first row seat to watching some of this. But going way back to the podcast, and she's got such a diverse background. She's been in corporate travel, she's been in marketing most of her life, and agency marketing, other things. And so I want to talk to her today about her journey and also talk about the importance of marketing. Now, if you don't own a business, that's okay because you're still marketing. And if you didn't see me, if you're listening to this, I did the little quote thing because ultimately you're telling a story on your social media. And so Meredith is like the ultimate teacher of storytelling, why that's important to both people that have a business and people that don't, just what you're displaying out there. And so we're going to get into all of that today, and I'm super excited. But one of the things, as you all know, is I feel like people introduce themselves much better than I would. So Meredith, I want you to introduce yourself to our audience, tell them a little bit about what you do, and then we're going to have a conversation.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Debbie. I kind of feel like I'm in the Wayback Machine here in some sense that we're together again after being together every single week for a podcast for over a year. And wow, time has sure brought so many amazing opportunities to both of us. And I'm so thrilled that we're here together again. It's just awesome. So my name is Meredith Banka, and I get paid to help people tell their stories. And at the end of the day, I believe your story is the backbone to great marketing. And if you don't know how to tell it right, then your message ends up being watered down and it doesn't hit the way that it needs to. And I know a lot of people that listen to this podcast, and most of the people that I work with are small businesses or solopreneurs. And I think that sometimes we get caught up in this idea that we can't play with the big dogs, that somebody else who does what we do, but does it on a bigger, more grand level is somehow winning and that we don't stand a chance. And if you only leave this episode today remembering one thing, I want you to remember that big corporations and big business would absolutely kill to be able to relate to their customers and their potential clients through story the way that you can, because people ultimately do buy from people. And the more that you can tell them your story, the more that you can give them hope, the more that you can show them that what they really want is possible through working with you and that you're an example of that, the more fun you're going to have, the more comfortable you're going to be promoting yourself, and the more revenue you're going to earn.
Yeah, so Meredith, I want to get into this, and I'm going to hold off talking to you a little bit more about business stuff. Let's back up and talk a little bit about your journey, and then I want to talk about some of the things you run into with people that are telling their story, like fear of being visible, all of those things. So
Mhm.
give us kind of a snapshot view of your journey. And Meredith is like rock star powerhouse. Like, if any of you know me, I hire people that are like rock stars, and Meredith is like one of my favorite people. And like, I can't even tell, like, Meredith, I don't even think I've told you this. Like, the amount of work that you have put into my business and the amount that you have produced is like far and above beyond anyone else I would have hired to do the work that you've done. And that does not go unnoticed. I know sometimes I get a little picky about details, but like it is like far none close to what anybody else could have produced. And so, but it took you a journey to get there.
Mm,
So tell
for
us a
sure.
little bit about that journey, because I met you doing the podcast, then you got into some
Mhm.
multi-level marketing stuff, which I signed up with you too, right? And
Yeah.
some great companies with that. So tell us a little bit about that journey, and then we're going to go into more of the business side of it in the next half.
Sure. Yeah. I found myself relocating in my late 20s and taking a job for an international educational travel company. And it was basically startup mode. It was like, Houston, we've got a problem. They were pouring all the parts out. And anybody who had great leadership skills and a, capacity to learn and move quickly was recognized and promoted. So I started working there for $10 an hour. And I left 13 years later as the vice president of marketing. So my multiple MBAs were earned in the workplace, not literally from a university, but I feel like I earned them because I had such great exposure to such incredible leadership. But ultimately, we welcomed a second child into our lives, and working for a travel company sounds fantastic until you have to travel away from your babies. And while I got to go some places that I'm still, in awe of, at the end of the day, I was looking for a different blend in my lifestyle. So I walked away from my corporate job with absolutely zero idea what I was going to do. I just knew it wasn't that. And I also was paranoid, to be frank, that I was going to become obsolete mom, right? And especially in the marketing world, it moves so fast. If you're not active in it, at an executive level, you're going to end up being passed over. And
And
that's just,
Meredith, you know what, too? I don't want to, I'm interrupting you here because I don't think in this world today that that's just specific to marketing. I feel like that across the board. Like it's been a while since I've been in corporate, but I get to stay in touch with business and what's happening. But it's like you can very quickly lose your relevancy. And that's a real fear that people have, right? But there are ways to get that relevancy back. So touch on that too as you move into
yeah.
and where you went into with this.
And I think it's especially an issue for women, and especially
Yeah.
when we step away to have children and to focus on family the way that I did. And so a girlfriend of mine had also left our same job for the same reason about 6 months prior to me. And we spun up an event-based business together largely because we wanted to stay active doing something in order to not shift my lifestyle any further after I walked away from, the multiple six figures and the matching 401k and the benefits and the travel and the stock options and all the things. I needed to make $1,000 a month in order to not dip any further into my savings and allow my family to stay at the same, lifestyle. And so my quest became, how do I make $1,000 a month? With zero to with little effort. And so an event-based business was a great way to do it because it was seasonal, and that worked out really well. And through that, I ended up being introduced to multi-level or network marketing. And I know some people have stories about it that are horrible, and trust me, I've heard them all. Because I was in the industry for quite a long time and was able to build a nice business and able to build a nice income and able to help a lot of other moms do the same thing. And just like any industry, I mean, somebody that sells a car that's amazing and somebody that's a shyster. It's the same in any industry. And I did that for quite some time, but there was still a component of it that was missing for me. And largely that was really being able to dive in at a deep level with somebody and help them to nurture their story and nurture their business into success. And so consulting kind of fell in my lap. The company that I worked for had fallen apart, and a lot of the executive leadership had moved on to other organizations, and my phone started to ring. And people started to ask me to come here and do this work and come there and do that work. And so I did that. And I started consulting and loving it, fell, further into coaching entrepreneurs, working with entrepreneurs, ultimately, met you, Debbie, and was able to work and earn as much as I wanted to, which I was very grateful for that. But I also know that I was keeping myself small. And I was telling myself that I was keeping myself small in service of my family. Which, I
Oh,
think there's partial truth to that, right? It's really where I wanted to be. And like your kids are only really little once, and you're only going to get that first day of kindergarten. I mean, today is the first day of school for my now 13-year-old, right? I sent him to junior high on the bus, and he didn't want me to wait at the bus stop. I was like, wow, we're
it
progressing.
progressed. Yeah.
But like nonetheless, it's like I will admit that I now look back and see it was really easy for me to not fully utilize my gifts because I allowed myself to put other people first. And over time, as my kids got older, what started happening is they needed me less as far as a time perspective goes, like the amount of time. Obviously, I still need to pour into them, and they need me maybe more and differently emotionally now as a young adult and a teenager than they did, as toddlers. But the time requirement is a bit different, right? And so as that opened up, I was like, wait a minute, there's more here under the hood. And I slowly started to allow myself to say, well, what if? Like, what if I fully expressed my gifts? What if I allowed myself to be as bold and powerful as a part of me was willing to recognize I could be? And about 2 years ago, I said, okay, let's move away from network marketing. Let's move away from multi-level marketing. And let's really pour into working with clients full time. And in the last year, I took another leap and decided to invest and hire a coach, hire somebody to do a VIP day with. When I showed up at her home, she was like, "Where have you been hiding?" Like you're still hiding yourself. And I think that was I wouldn't say the last straw, but that was just another breakthrough moment where I was like, you know what? Right, the timing is right. All things for a purpose, all things in the right timing. And so now I've been able to, take the agency that I started and turn it into a multi six-figure agency. I've been able to add a couple of people that work with me almost full time and serve dozens of clients at the same time. And it's awesome. And um,
Yeah. And
you know,
here's what's awesome about it too, because Meredith, I want to go back. Yes, I think there's something to it where what I see with women is when they go into something and they're working, they feel guilty when they're at work because they think they should be home. And then when they're at home, they feel guilty because they think they should be working. And if we could do away with that, it'd be so cool because like I want the audience to know like that was a story because last year was when you made this big jump, right? And I remember meeting with you in January at your lake house and we did some trade-off coaching and I was like, dang it, she's not going to take the jump right now, right? Like, and I just was like, oh, and then when I called you later and said I should have hired you back when we talked in January, like we both were kind of at that next level thing. And what was interesting to me is like, yes, they needed a little bit less time per se with you. However, I look at energy too. And
mhm.
you home freaking schooled your son, right? You had a daughter move to Calgary to go
Mhm.
to her, like she was still in high school to because she's a
Mhm.
beautiful ballerina and go to this school. Like you were doing all of these things that still required the same amount of energy, frankly, probably a little bit more, and organization and time and wear all these hats and jump into doing this thing that kept calling in your soul. And now you're just like, woof, right? Like
Yeah, I
gangbusters.
mean, it's true. Like, I put my son on the bus today. Like I said, I have been
Yeah,
homeschooling him for the last 2 years because it was what was the best fit for him at the point that
absolutely.
he was. And I mean, that was an experience in and of itself. We could do a whole podcast about the ins and outs of homeschooling. But it's true, I think to me it's a question of capacity. And I think that sometimes external influences lead us to believe that we have less capacity than we actually do. And so one of the mantras that I say to myself frequently is I compress time frames. It drives my mom absolutely nuts. I refuse to wear a watch. I hate them. I don't like them. I don't like to be bound by time in that way. It squashes my creative process. Um, I compress time frames, the amount that I am able to get done because of the way that I'm choosing to lead my life. And you asked about like so the lit up life. Yeah, in the middle of all of this, and my husband is self-employed as well. We started his business from the ground up 10 years ago. Um, our dream retirement home fell into our lap 15 years before we thought that we would ever be buying a lakefront home. And, through nothing other than sheer belief, we were able to actually pull that off and make that happen. We were sitting there this week and we're like, wow, this is our fifth summer here, and it seems so normal now.
And
But there
you've
was
turned it
a time.
into a revenue stream.
Yeah, we turned it into a revenue stream. Right, exactly. And so, we make money in multiple ways. My favorite way is the storytelling. My favorite way is, helping people really bring their gifts to the world. Um, because the reality is most people aren't people love to talk about themselves, but people do not like to promote themselves. And there's a difference, right? And if you can tap into ways that you can tell your story that feel natural, that feel organic, but that also paint the picture of what's possible for the people you want to work with, then that is like the true essence of being able to market really, really well. But storytelling is important for everybody because we are all constantly in a position to be promoting ourselves. I don't care if you're volunteering. I don't care if you're promoting yourself in order to help your child or to help your parent. The way that you represent yourself and the way that you choose to tell your story impacts everything that you do. And so,
Absolutely.
I think it's a critical skill to have, and it truly is, in my mind, like I said, the backbone of great marketing.
Yeah, and it brings up, so I've said all of my life, and people that are listening to this that were with me in corporate have heard me say this too, that everything in life is a sales call, right? We're always influencing people. And so we have to determine what is that story. And, I have talked about this before too, about getting rid of the mask. It is about being in the messy too and being authentic and sharing your story. It's not about putting all these masks on and everything's perfect, but understanding how to tell your story in a way that resonates with people is really important. So we're going to take a quick break. And, part of this first part of the podcast is really to understand Meredith's story and understand too that there's mindset things that go on with all of this. And now, as we move into the second half, I really want to dig into what it is that you do and how you would recommend to people to tell their story and the importance of that, all of those things. So we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. I want to give a quick shout out to my favorite online community for women entrepreneurs. It's called Build Her. If you've craved a space to connect with other women who truly get the journey, this is your space. We go live monthly for in-depth training on all things business, and it's where you'll get the latest news from the lit up life first. Plus a chance to swap stories, tips, and triumphs with an amazing community of women. It's welcoming, it's fun, and it's where we cheer each other on through every up and down of entrepreneurship. Join us and let's build each other up. Check it out at thelituplife.com/buildher. Okay, we are back and we've talked about Meredith's life, kind of how she morphed through all of this, and even looking at the mindset of that and some of the stories that we tell ourselves, and particularly as women, we do that a lot. And I will tell you, Meredith is like I'm still a work in progress, right? Like I even found myself this last week when I was at the ranch, I was doing some videos for her team to use as reels, and some people that I was like experiencing this week with were walking kind of next to me and I'm like, I can't do this while they're next to me, right? Like, so I found myself even falling into some of those things. And what Meredith really does and has helped me with a lot is getting to the clarity of what the message is. And that could be whether or not you are owning a business or not. Now, she works with business owners, but I want you to tell us what what is it that you're finding that people struggle with and as they get ready to, because you're right, being visible is one. Like I look at the rocks that you help people disintegrate,
Mhm.
right? One of them is the fear of being visible because we worry about judgment from other people
Mhm.
and the worry about promotion. And I'm sure there's other things in there, but those two are ones I run into a lot with people, and I'm sure you do too. So tell us a little
Yeah.
bit about how you help people overcome that, and then how do they tell their story?
Yeah. Yeah. On the visibility front, I'll tell a quick story. We switched our daughter to a school for fifth grade that was all for children who were gifted and talented. And she went from being the smartest child in the entire grade at her school to one of many smart children and not the smartest one. And I picked her up on the first day of school and she got into the car and she was bawling and crying and telling me that she hated it, that she never wanted to go back. I was the worst mom ever for sending her there. And I remember looking at her and saying, you know what? My job is to help you maximize your gifts. That's my job as your mom. And you have a lot of gifts. Not everybody has as many gifts as you do. And for somebody who has a lot of gifts, you could argue that it's more difficult because you have more to give and you have more out there to do. And, she at 11 wanted nothing to do with it. But now at 19, she'll reflect back on that and be like, you know what, mom, that does make sense. Like if I wouldn't have gone to that school, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing now. And like that carved the course for me to graduate high school early and pursue my dream in the arts and all of this. And it's the same for us as individuals. You've been given gifts, and whether you believe that those are divine gifts or whether they're gifts and talents that you've developed, physically, mentally, whatever it is, I believe that you have a duty to share those gifts with the world. And if you can approach the concept of being vulnerable enough to share your experience and share your gifts, you will make an impact on another person. And isn't that why we're here? I mean, it boils down to that. We're here to make the world a better place. We are here to influence and impact one another through our own unique experiences. But if you keep all of that to yourself, I actually think that you're not living up to your full potential. And I want to help people. I help people every day step into saying, you know what? Yeah, I have a lesson that I've learned. I want to share it with other people. And that plays into the business side of things and storytelling, because what has happened is that we have moved from a transactional economy that came out of the industrial, time frame of the world, really, that was like, hey, buy my thing. It's the cheapest, the 19 cents, coffee here, 18 cents here, and it's just all about price, not about benefit, not about relationship. And consumers became tired of that, and they started to say, relationships matter to us. I get to choose where I spend my money. I don't have to just spend it at the next place because it's there. And that's really, in my opinion, where small business became favored, because we have the unique distinction to be able to develop relationship. But relationship is also based in story, because think about how you have learned throughout your life. How did you learn as a child? You learned because somebody told you the story of Hansel and Gretel, and that was a story to tell you about stranger danger, right? You learned through story. Tradition is passed down through story. Religion is passed down through story. Lore is passed down through story. So I also believe that as humans, we are innately developed and designed to learn, remember, and act based on the stories that we're told. So if you're in business and you want people to be aware of you, tell them a great story. If you want them to fall in love with you, tell them a great story. And if you want them to buy from you, tell them a great story. They won't forget. But if you're just screaming at them to buy your thing or pay attention to you, it's no longer enough. So those two things combined really are the pillars that I teach when I work with our clients or when I lead classes or, do speaking events. It's for people to understand you've got a gift to share. You have a duty to share it. And I can help you do that in a way that allows you to stay 100% in your authentic self with your voice, your style, your heart, your soul, your compassion, and feel really good doing it so that you'll want to do it again and again.
Yeah, and Meredith, do you find that sometimes people struggle with knowing their authentic self? And the reason I ask that is a lot of women that I work with, they wear these hats. We wear the hat of mother, wife, leader, whatever. And it's like we take these hats off and put them back on versus
Mhm.
embracing the messy, which by the way is my new mantra, embracing the messy, and being able to like share the mess because that's where it's relevant, right? Like I find particularly as women, now I'm not saying we're disorganized because we are not. Like for the most part, like there is organization, there is like we get a lot of shit done as women, right? And
Mhm.
so like when you think about that and yes, the authentic self, where does the messy fit into that?
Well, that is part of who you are, right? I mean, when I start working with somebody, the first thing that we tackle is values. Like what really matters to you? And it's surprising to me how infrequently people have actually taken the time to articulate what matters to them and how they live and how they want to be represented in the world and how they want to show up. And when you can determine what your values are as a person, then you're able to stay in that zone of being authentic and also honoring yourself. And I think for promotion, we've been taught and trained, and you teach a lot of this in your sales workshops and your sales guides. We've been taught and trained that sales is nasty, that sales is masculine, where we're going to get taken advantage of. So it's not your fault that you don't love it. You've been trained and taught and told not to love it. You've been told it's bad. And so it's a matter of saying, wait a minute, this is something that has to happen in my business. I have to promote myself. I mean, it would be great if like customers and money just, rain from the sky, but they don't. So we have to be able to promote ourselves. So how can I do it in a way that allows me to stay centered and in a way that I can actually fall in love with? And it starts with staying centered in the values.
Yeah, and Meredith, to that point, like what I teach is not the ick of sales, just to
Yeah.
clarify. But like the fact that it has to be aligned with your soul, right? And both of those things, and that's where I see us as very complementary with that, because the promotion of it to get people to know, like, and trust you and understand what you stand for, you have to know what you stand for in
Mhm.
order to be able to show people what you stand for. And
Yep.
then that flies into then to the sales call, because when you're talking to people about how to work with you, you're coming from that same place, and it's
Mhm.
not a slick sales call, right? So part of that is I'm hearing the messy, the authenticity, the way people relate to you, but they also relate to confidence. Like that's one thing that I find too, that I talk to people about a lot, is that when they're talking to people, people hire people because they know what they're doing.
Mhm.
Now, it doesn't mean what's the word I'm kind of looking for? It doesn't mean this like stuck up little snotty kind of
Mhm.
I'm the next best thing since sliced bread kind of thing. But like when you know what you stand for, you know who you are. That's the base story that I talk about, right? Like what works for you, what doesn't. There is a level of authority that comes with that.
Mhm.
That's not something that's considered to be unhumble, right? Like it's just, I know my stuff and I want to be able to help people
Mhm.
to get to that place that they want to be at, and I know what I'm doing. It's
Yep.
not about like, oh, pick me all the time, right? Like to talk to us a little bit about the difference in that, like authentic, like I talk about inspired action, that authentic inspired promotion versus spammy promotion. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, for sure. Um, I think the people that are doing well in this current market are audacious enough to tell their truth.
Yeah.
And they have the courage to do that. And hands down, they are winning because people are attracted to that courage. They're attracted to the concept of like, wow, I'm going to follow this person. I'm going to like this person. I'm going to buy from this person because they were where I was once and they know the path to get me where I want to be. Or if it's like consumer product goods, you'll often hear people say, like, yeah, I bought that dress, I bought that makeup, I bought that, whatever, because I liked the story. I liked the story behind it. It's giving money to animals or whatever. They like it and they will buy because of the story. So that's where the two are important. Where it gets spammy is when you're just talking about features. When you just are talking about, like what it is, there's no heart in it. It's clearly just this concept of, I want you to buy my thing. I don't really care what happens to you afterwards. It's nothing more than a wham bam, thank you, ma'am, kind of a transaction. And that used to work. It doesn't work anymore. It's like, what drives me crazy is probably every day I get somebody in my DMs that is like, oh, I saw your profile and I think that, what I have is perfect for you. I'm like, are people really still doing this? Are people really still thinking that that's the way to sell? Right? Or dropping into Facebook groups and just spamming links on other people's posts. I see this all the time too. And a lot of the time that's a bot. It's not even a person doing it. It's just some bot that's like spamming the link. And I'm like, is there, show me the consumer that's actually clicking on that and buying, right? It's like, and if they are, they're probably not the person that you want to be doing business with, right? It's like that kind of thing just drives me crazy. We're going to continue to develop and evolve with technology, with messaging, with AI, with all the things that are happening in our world right now. But I will go to my grave believing that human connection through storytelling, authentically based in values, will always win.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Meredith, because it goes to, and as a matter of fact, I just wrote down a note to get you a chart that I made up a long time ago around kind of this features, advantages, and benefits, right? And
Mhm.
when you can tell the story and when you can connect it to people personally, like that shows a level of care that you have for people, which again, like I go back to Nordstrom's, right? Like Nordstrom's keeps coming into my mind. part of what's made them so successful is this idea of customer service and treating the client. And they trust that the type of clients that come to their stores are not people that are going to go buy some chintzy thing somewhere else and bring it in and return it to Nordstrom's, right? Because they'll take back anything. Like they've taken
Mhm.
tires back before and they don't sell tires, right? But like they have a belief and manifest that belief that the type of client that they have are going to be truthful, they're going to be honest. It goes back to the values, but then they also connect with why it's beneficial for people to shop with them. And people will pay a little bit more for a product
Mhm.
there because of that, right? And that's part of what I hear you talking about is personalizing your story, showing up in the messy, showing up in an area that's relevant to people. And don't get too caught up in what's relevant. When you talk from the heart, that's relevant to people, right?
Yeah. And people will say, oh, well, I don't have a story. And that's the furthest from the truth that it could be. Everyone has a story, and we're not looking for it to be, the craziest, most outlandish, hangover movie kind of story, right? And we're also not looking for it to be the most tragic, awful comeback story either. Do those exist? Like crazy stories that are just like cliffhangers, you can't wait to hear the next thing? Yes. And people come back from tragedy? Yes, but if either one of those things isn't your story, that doesn't mean that you can't tell it in a way that allows people to see enough of you to say, wait a minute, I'm going to pay attention to this because I can learn here, I can grow here, I can transform some part of my life here.
Yeah, and Meredith, you know what? You bring up something that I kind of want to close with, and then I'm going to ask you the questions that I always ask at the end is that, comparison is the killer to joy. And I
Mhm.
find not only the visibility and the promotion, but what I find people struggle with the most is comparing, oh, my story is not as bad as theirs or as good as theirs. Your story is awesome because it's your unique story. Like
Mhm.
what we talked about in the beginning of this podcast is unique to you, and it inspires other people to think, hey, I can be a mom, I can run a business, I can homeschool and do all of the things, right?
Mhm.
I just might have to set up processes a little differently than someone else that doesn't do that. And
Mhm.
so I think to me, that's one of the big pieces that I see people stop themselves with is comparing themselves to other people. And there is no comparison. We're all different. And when you backtrack and look at your life, I don't care who you are, and you start to do a timeline, and I'm going to recommend that to people. Do a timeline of events that have happened in your life. Like I've done it before where you just draw a line and you do the highs and the lows. And as you do it, don't get all bound up that you didn't capture everything. Go back to it and you're going to find, oh, I want to make that higher because this was a high, but not as high as that one. And you start to build the story of your life, and that builds into the story of the business that you're in,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And so as you do that, like, don't compare it to anybody else. It's your unique story. And so, kind of with that, Meredith, I know you're not a big reader, but I'm going to ask you this question anyway, because I know you're a big content consumer. Tell
Mhm.
us, like, when you think about the content, a book, magazine, article, whatever that has made a big impact in your life, or a podcast, other than
Mhm.
mine, of course, what what would you say is something that you would recommend to people?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of a guy named Gary Vaynerchuk of VaynerMedia or Gary V. Many of you probably know him, but I just love his approach to life. I love his approach to business. I love the guidance that he gives. And he's done something really brilliant where he provides guidance to people across the age bands. He addresses people in their 20s, he addresses people in their 60s and 70s. And he's just incredibly positive, incredibly straightforward. I love, love, love his podcast. I love like basically everything that he puts out, I just think is amazing.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. And if we were to go out to whatever, I always want to say, do you remember the Walkman? Like, what's your mixtape that you're listening to?
Yeah.
If we went out to the streaming platform that you listen to the most, what would be your most played song or your favorite song that you have right now?
Well, I listen to the same yoga playlist every day, so you'd probably get the most hits off of that. But just yesterday, I was working to the White Stripes, if you're a fan of that band. So I was a 80s punk rock
Yeah.
queen, and that hard rock part of me, I always say, like, I'm like 40% hippie, 40% punk rock, like 20% Martha Stewart.
That's awesome. I love it. That's such a good description for you. I love that. So, last question. If somebody wanted to work with you, wanted to find out more about you, where would you send them? And folks will have this in the show notes as well.
Sure. Yeah. I'd love for people to just come check out our website. Our company is called True Story Marketing Mastery. So you can just go to truestorymarketing.com. And if you're really interested in understanding how to start a story, we've got a great free downloadable PDF that's called 101 Story Hooks to help you stand out. And you can get that at truestorymarketing.com/101 and then the word hooks. So 101 hooks. And it's a great, great guide, whether you're speaking, introducing yourself, writing some content, or you're just curious about fun ways that you could start your story and grab people's attention.
Fabulous. Meredith, thank you so much for your time today and for your expertise. And if you are wanting to do any kind of marketing, rebranding, whatever it is, reach out to Meredith. I send people to her all the time, and I would not recommend if I didn't think she was such a rock star. So reach out to her. Thank you again for spending time with us. And with that, folks, it's a wrap. That's a wrap for this conversation. I'm so glad you've joined us. Remember to subscribe to the podcast so you can catch all of our future episodes, and visit us at thelituplife.com for details on how you can become part of the Lit Up Life community. A quick shout out to my friend Jackie Wilson and her friends, the creators of our amazing theme music. Thanks so much for allowing us to share this perfect song with our listeners. Looking forward to having you listen in to our next episode.